Today's show is brought to you by locally owned and operated Highland Rim Speedway. Highland Rim Speedway is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year with great short track door-to-door stock car racing in a safe, family-friendly atmosphere. Visit their website at highlandrim.com.
Well, for NASCAR, it's California, here we come, but not before we have our old-fashioned little dust-up in Bristol. Hi, everybody. Joe Williams coming up next on Pit Pass. We'll talk about Bristol, California, and the area's best little short track, Highland Rim. All that with Larry Woody and more coming up next.
From the family grocery hauler to fire-breathing racing engines, the one name you need to know is USA Motor and Machine, located at 51 Cleveland Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. Give them a call at 615-726-3725 or at usamotorandmachine.com.
Talkapolis, the social media TV network for your city.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of Pit Pass. I'm Joe Williams, along with Larry Woody. And Larry, it's California, here we come. But first, we got to talk about the great little track up in East Tennessee, Bristol Motor Speedway. Another good race, apparently. I mean, Casey Kane. Casey who? Who's Casey Kane?
Casey Kane. Tough little guy from the great Northwest, good little driver, sharp driver.
Has had some struggles the past couple of years.
He has. Got with a good team this year, though, and I think, or last year actually, and I think he's kind of finding his stride. I think he's one of the real up-and-comers. He'll be a superstar before he's through.
Oh, I don't think it's dangerous.
Already one of the superstars, but I mean, he'll be big eventually.
Couple of notes out of Bristol. Casey Kane wins the race. Larry, a couple of things that hit me over the weekend. One, Kurt Busch and his team comes in fourth. That may be the best finish for Furniture Row.
One thing about Kurt Busch, Joe, he can, and we saw this last year when he drove some for James Finch. Kurt is so talented, he can take a middle-of-the-pack car and run up front in it. You know, it's not just coincidence. As I say, he did it the race after last year with James Finch. Nothing against James in his operation, but he's not a top of the flight team operation. He doesn't have the finances, but Kurt would take Finch's car, run up front. Now he's taking another second, maybe even third-rate car and putting it up front. That's a tribute to Kyle Busch's driving ability.
Oh, Kurt Busch. But you know, by the same token, Kurt Busch can take a top-notch race car driver and let his personality make him a nothing. So.
Yeah, he could take a top-flight ride and
destroy it. Yeah, it's hopefully. But you know what? Give him credit. So far, I think he's done better.
Yep.
Hopefully this time he truly has learned some things.
Maybe those anger management lessons are starting to kick in.
Yeah, seem to be helping his little brother, son, who's doing better.
Both Bushes, tremendously talented, but sometimes their tantrums get the best of them.
In the middle of all this, I think Kyle was in the top group for a while, and you had, obviously blistered. I mean, we're talking sub 14 seconds for a qualifying lap. Had it not been for a speeding penalty on pit road, he might have actually won the race, because when it started, he checked out on him.
Yeah. And
just took off. Junior wound up sixth, I think. We'll talk in a little bit about how the point standings are shaking out, because you got some guys with pretty good names who had really good starts to the 13 season. But it wouldn't be Bristol unless there was a little rubbin, because rubbin is racing.
Sure.
And
fans love it.
Sure. And late in the race, a little rubbin between former teammates, Joey Lagono and Denny Hamlin, sent Lagono around and around. And when it was over, I mean, 23rd and 27th, I think is where they both finished. It's not like this was really for a top position. And when it was done, Joey Lagono was not happy, and the kid even went to Hamlin's car to tell him what he thought.
Yeah. And it wouldn't be Bristol if you didn't have a little driver's spat after it's over. That's part of it. It's supposed to be a rough, tough track, and the emotions are supposed to boil over a little, and then they go over and they tell each other what they think about them and their cars and their grandmothers. And then by next week, when we get to California this weekend, they'll be best buds again. But that's all part of Bristol. That used to be the charm of Bristol. Maybe it's coming back a little.
Now, the other side of that story is Denny Hamlin, of course, said very little about this. Probably did not want to see a $50,000 fine.
He said this is the greatest car in
Yes,
the history of
that's right.
stock car racing, and he certainly hopes NASCAR keeps doing exactly what it's been doing. That it's, if you look at a dictionary beside perfection, you'll see one of NASCAR's cup cars. No, Denny probably did the prudent thing, Joe, when he backed down. You know, he's kind of bucking the system. You know, when NASCAR smacked him with a $25 fine for daring to say that his car didn't run well, which drivers have said historically when they don't win a race, they say their car didn't run well. But this is particularly sensitive, Joe, because NASCAR, as everybody knows, has invested so much in this G6 car, prodded along by the manufacturers. Yeah. And, you know, this is NASCAR's baby, and they didn't like to be told by Denny Hamlin that they have an ugly baby. Even if, you know, as we know, if your baby may be so ugly that you got to put a pork chop around his neck to get the dog to play with him, but you still don't want to be told your baby's ugly, even though everybody knows it's ugly. So Denny made the mistake of telling NASCAR that its baby wasn't very attractive and got smacked. Having said all that, Denny backed down, and probably, like you said before we went on, Denny probably didn't pay that $25,000 fine. Probably team owner Joe Gibbs or Toyota shelled it out for him and just said, Denny, quieten down, let it blow over, and let's go, you know, get on with the season.
2 points to this. One, it actually came out of the team winnings, which I'm sure Toyota or Gibbs put back in it, because when it comes out of the team winnings, it starts to affect everybody on the team who may get the pit crew, et cetera, who may get a small portion based on the winnings. And secondly, you know, Mr. Hammond had a good point I read earlier this week when he said it's kind of hard to believe Denny would talk about how bad the car was or that it couldn't pass when he came from the rear of the field and passed everybody all the way back to the front.
Yeah, again, I think Denny was just frustrated. As I say, every driver, Joe, who doesn't win is frustrated. Sure. And if you catch them in the heated aftermath of the race when they're frustrated, sometimes they say things that they probably wouldn't say otherwise. Having said that, they said that historically. You know, I've never seen a runner-up driver who was happy that he got beat. And that's kind of all Denny said. Somebody asked him about the car, and he said, I didn't think it performed particularly well in the clutch down the stretch run, and I thought NASCAR overreacted. I guess if there's anything I took away from this, Joe, it's how some of the TV guys kind of buckled under it and kowtowed to NASCAR, and particularly our buddy Darrell Waltrip. You know, Darrell used to be the resident rebel of the sport, and when I asked Darrell what he thought about it, he thought, you know, NASCAR was right, that they should have whacked Denny for criticizing him, and nobody's criticized NASCAR, as you know, more than Darrell Waltrip over the years. And I thought it was looked kind of bad, I thought, for some of these guys to be towing that company line so shamelessly.
You know, I guess I think back, Larry, to days gone by. In this situation, my perception, my memory is that if something like that happened, and Darrell's been in a couple of these, you know, we call it going to the NASCAR trailer. In the old days, you went to Bill France Jr.'s office. And when Bill got done with you, you pretty well knew you didn't want to do this again. A little bit different now with this public money fine, and yeah, I mean that's the double-edged sword here is, Denny, you came from the back to the front before you complained about the car, but secondly, the overreaction, I think, and coming on the heels of the overreaction to the situation at Daytona, and what I mean by overreaction at Daytona, please do not misunderstand. I thought they handled the physical part of it extremely well. They had a great plan in place. They got the injured fans out of there. They got the track repaired. But it was their media folks trying to control what went in and out of there is where they overreacted. And to an extent, they did the same thing here.
Yeah, and again, Joe, my point is not whether Denny was correct or incorrect about whining about his car. I just think a driver has a right to whine if he wants to whine. And I don't think NASCAR should be slapping duct tape over their mouths and saying telling them what they can say and can't say. And particularly after a couple of years ago, remember NASCAR made such a big deal about they don't want these cardboard cutouts anymore. They want these plastic drivers. They want real people out there showing real emotions, and part of the boys have at it philosophy. And then somebody speaks their mind, and NASCAR gets all bent out of shape and in effect muzzles them, penalizes Denny for saying something I thought fairly bland and routine. I thought that was what I took out of it.
Hey, at least they're not having to get him out of jail. It's not like some other sports, you know.
In the good old days.
Yeah, well, even, yeah. A couple of other notes for you. Where'd Danica finish?
Danica who?
Okay.
I wrote it down. So I had to look it up somewhere. She was way down toward the bottom.
28th.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's her
Struggling. She's struggling.
third bad race after making such a splash at Daytona. You know, right out of the box. We said then, Joe, after Daytona, remember, said, don't get too excited. This is one race in a long season. Let's not award her the championship yet. As good as she looked at Daytona, sitting on the pole, just ran a tremendous race, and then the next 3 weeks she's falling flat on her face. Looks like driving Miss Daisy out there. Yeah. Again, having said that, we're 4 races into it now, with still a lot of racing to go, so it's too early to write Danica off. She may turn this thing around, but man, she's really gone from sky high to rock bottom these last 3 weeks.
But Larry, I think they kind of expected that, understanding her experience on some of these small and intermediate tracks. Most of the open wheel stuff she had done was on the bigger tracks. I think California is kind of the turning point this weekend. It's a big, wide open 2 mile. It's just like Michigan. She's raced a lot at Michigan. We'll find out then, with that big, wide open racetrack. One other note before we close the segment. Kyle Busch wins the nationwide race. That's not the story. Where everybody else finished is not the story, except for the guy who finished second, a young man by the name of Kyle Larson, who best known for leaving his engine in the grandstands at Daytona, but better known probably before that for knocking everybody out of the way so he could win races early in the week at Daytona and down in the Florida area. Found it interesting. And I don't know if Larry, he learned that's not the good thing to do, or if he sat back there and said, I ain't hitting Kyle Busch. But he made a run, but he never hit him.
You have to temper enthusiasm with wisdom. So maybe had a little of both. I like to see young guys, young hungry guys who are trying to get their foot in this tough door and make a living in the sport, make a mark in the sport. I don't have any problem with them beating and banging and doing what they got to do to get up front. Having said that, he probably was a little bit
overly aggressive.
Yeah, well, yeah, and last week, then, as you say, maybe the wisdom is a little.
Well, with experience comes wisdom. Maybe he's experienced enough.
Little discretion, as they say.
Sometimes discretion is a better part of valor.
Right.
All right, we're going to take a break here. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about California that's coming up and a couple of other things. Don't forget, too, to go visit our friends at Nissan of Rivergate. Now, the guys up there can take care of you whether you're looking for a new Nissan or a pre-owned Nissan or pre-owned anything else. If you want it, they can find it for you. Trey, the guys are awful good at that. So go by and see them. They're on Gallatin Road, just south of Rivergate Mall, about a mile. You can't miss it. And grab some popcorn out front, too. Have a bag for me. We'll be back with more coming up next on Pit Pass.
Jeff Meeks and Chris Austin invite you to watch your favorite sports event at the Batter's Box at 43 Hermitage Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. The Batter's Box offers shuttle service to all Titans home games. It's a great place for friends to gather for the game and after the game. So check out the Batter's Box Bar and Grill, and thanks again for sponsoring the show.
And welcome back, everybody, to Pit Pass. Joe Williams and Larry Woody as we wrap up a couple of extra notes on Bristol before we go to California. Larry, visually, the crowd was not what I think they'd hoped for.
Well, it's the eternal question, Joe. Was the track half empty or half full? Are you an optimist or a pessimist? I thought it was half, for better or worse, about half full. It's supposedly 160,000. The crowd for the Cup race Sunday was kind of scattered out all around the track, so it was kind of deceptive if you took them and squeezed the crowd together. Maybe 80,000, about half full. Now, having said that, most pro sports would give their eye teeth to get 80,000 people turning out. It's almost like NASCAR, and Bristol's is a victim of its own success. They drew those monster crowds for so long that when they start dropping off a little, what would be a good crowd for most sports is kind of half full for Bristol. But again, kind of disappointing. And on the Saturday nationwide race, Joe, it was really bad, judging from, I was home watching on television, and that's the fewest fans I've seen in the Bristol stands since they expanded to 160,000 seats. It was abysmal. Sunday race better, but again, about half full. I don't know what the problem is, but whatever it is, it hasn't been completely solved yet.
Two thoughts of mine on that. Number one, Larry McReynolds said 2-3 years ago when we all started looking at crowds and going, they stink. It's not the crowds stink, it's just that NASCAR facilities were overbuilt. There were too many seats. If you'd had 100,000 seats, it'd look good, but you got 160, so you got to fill those too. Secondly, as far as the nationwide race, I got to be honest, and this is a personal opinion, but I fear for the nationwide series, Larry. I feel for all series in NASCAR except for the Cup, because 5 or 6 years ago, there seemed to be a very conscious decision in Daytona that we're going to put all our eggs in this one basket, and these other baskets over here can catch a couple as they fall. The Truck Series may be the best pure racing on a national quote major league level, but you don't get to see much of it.
No, that's the trouble. I don't think there's any question. The Cup Series is the most competitive week after week, but only it's not week after week. It's they run one and wait 3 weeks and maybe run another, and by the time they run another Cup race, you can't remember what the point standings are, who's leading, who the good drivers are. You've lost all those storylines that you need, the continuity to keep that fan interest. So again, the Truck Series suffers from that. And your point on the nationwide series struggles, Joe, we don't have to look any farther than here in our backyard at the Super Speedway in Gladeville to see what happened there. You know, Dover tried to live on Cup races, on nationwide races and truck races, and couldn't do it. The fans just wouldn't turn out large enough numbers to support the nationwide series here. So, and Gary Baker, you know, our friend Gary Baker, he and Mike Curb tried to field a team in the nationwide series, and if Gary Baker and Mike Curb can't make a go of it with their almost 50, 60 years of expertise in the sport and the market and everything, if they can't do it, I don't know how anybody can do it. But you're right, the second tier series is in trouble, and if NASCAR doesn't crank the Truck Series up and start getting more races around, it'll be in trouble.
Well, it just scares me a little bit for both of them.
And you hate it because there's so much potential there, so many good storylines. And NASCAR, to its credit, tried to do some things. You know, they made the Cup full-timers ineligible for the nationwide title.
Points,
double-edged sword. The fans like to see the Cup guys in the nationwide races. As you know, when you call the races out at the Super Speedway, when they would introduce that handful of Cup drivers that came out there to the interlopers, the double dippers as they call them, they would get the biggest ovations of anybody. You know, the fans love to see the Cup guys. The downside is, as Gary Baker would tell you, the Cup guys come in and were winning all the races and taking away all the prize money. So it's a tough decision, and I'm sure NASCAR is wrestling with it as we speak.
Well, you know, we've talked before about, you know, how do you fix it? I think the move to no points was a good start. Maybe it's time to set a purse where if you don't get points, you only get half the purse, and you distribute it on down from there, and give these regular guys some extra money. I don't know. The biggest thing is, you were talking about the consistency in the Truck Series and in the Nationwide Series, the musical racing seats. You know, we would have a lot that would, especially late out at the Super Speedway, where you'd have a nationwide race come in, and there would be 4 or 5 TBAs. Here's a team owner who's entered a car, entries
be
made,
announced.
but under driver it's TBA, to be announced. And it's almost like, well, we're just waiting to see who's going to bring most money.
And the other thing, speaking of money, Gary Baker said that's part of the problem. Sponsors have so much influence, particularly on that level, that they kind of dictate to the nationwide team owners what driver they want in the seat, and most of them opt for the Cup guys. You know, they like to see Greg Biffle driving Gary Baker's nationwide car because Biffle's one of the Cup superstars, and so it's kind of tough to develop those young drivers for a team when the sponsors are paying the bills. If they got a choice between a Greg Biffle and Joe Blow, they say put Biffle in the seat. So again, it's tough to develop the young guys if they can't get in the cars. Another one of those nationwide quandaries, and I'm not smart enough to figure it out, and I don't believe NASCAR has. Well, obviously NASCAR hadn't figured it out
either.
Neither is Dover Motorsports, you know, that built this beautiful racetrack in Gladeville, and it kind of fell flat on its face. You know, even people who've done business in NASCAR for 40 years or so, they're sitting around scratching their collective heads trying to figure out what exactly the problem is, and when they figure that out, how to fix it.
So I think it's an issue. There's just not an easy answer.
There's not.
Easy answer, though, on the schedule is we go to California this week, Larry. California, a sister track to Michigan. Roger Penske recovered a brownfield. Did a great environmental thing to create what is now the Auto Club Speedway. They still have the naming rights. But it is an exact copy almost of Michigan, which I've seen very few.
You're trying to think of a nice way to say this, aren't you?
Yeah, you know what I'm getting ready to say.
It's California's a 2-mile track.
A snoozer.
Fairly level, low banked. And historically, the racing hadn't been that good. Drivers have so many places to go and hide out there. They can get out, get the field strung out, just ride around most of the day and log laps, which from the driver's standpoint might be the smart thing to do. From a spectator standpoint, we might as well go out on Briley Parkway and watch the afternoon rush hour because there's usually more action. But having said that, now we're sitting here complaining about what a boring race is going to be Sunday in California. They'll come out and have maybe the most dramatic race we've ever seen. It's hard to call these things, but you're right. Historically, those big tracks like 2 miles, flat tracks, they're just not conducive to old-fashioned stock car racing.
Let me get off track of where I was headed here for a second. Just throw something at you because you're talking about maybe they'll go have an exciting race. Is it possible that it's time to shorten these cup races? You get the early start where everybody's jammed up together. And from about the 10%, 20% mark to the 90% mark, 70% of the race, all anybody wants to do is maintain.
They're just riding.
And riding.
Yep.
Is it possible we need to cut the distance on these things?
Well, Joe, NASCAR already has cut some of them.
Right.
We've seen some of the 500 lappers, or milers going to 400 miles. The problem is TV, because television doesn't want to lose an hour of programming because that's another hour of sponsorships they can sell and make a whole lot of money to pay Darrell and Larry and Mike and
NASCAR.
And NASCAR. NASCAR gets make sure
NASCAR get good money.
They get their slice of that juicy pie. So that's the drawback shortening races. You also cut your telecast, radio and TV telecast, and you reduce your sponsorship dollars, which maybe we're talking millions and millions over the course of the season. So that's the drawback to that. But I've found a good way around that, Joe. I turn the race on at home, watch the start, the first 10 or 15 laps, read a good book, and then start watching the last 15 or 20 laps. And I'll keep the TV on. If I hear Darrell start yelling, I'll look up and see what's going on.
But that's the scary part. I think those of us who watch at home have gotten to that point.
Yeah, you kind of snooze or read or do something else. And it's almost amusing sometimes, Joe, with the telecast when you see the cameras frantically searching back through the field, maybe to find 2 cars running close together for 28th position, and they'll put the camera on them because the 27 cars ahead of them are strung out running single file, and they're frantically trying to find some kind of action. And the other day at Bristol, a couple of cars brushed against each other, and the TV guys kept replaying. Oh man, that was close. Did you see that? Man, they almost got together there. In the old days, if you could find a lap when 2 cars didn't get together, that was unusual. But now, I guess you take your action where you can find it.
California, the 4th race of the year will be the 4th different type of racetrack. You had the 2.5-mile superspeedway at Daytona. You went from there to Phoenix, which is a mile and a quarter,
About
a mile and a half, mile, whatever. Kind of a strange little layout. Then this week they were at the High Bank Short Track of Bristol.
Had Vegas in between.
Had Vegas in between the standard mile and a half. So this will be the 5th race of the year.
Yeah.
But 5 races, 5 different types of racetracks.
Yeah, this will be the 5th different kind of track that they've raced on in 5 races. And these are professional drivers and mechanics, veteran teams, all that. I never thought, Joe, the adjustment should be that hard. You think about golf pros, they have to play 18 holes, and they're all different. And every hole you have to, one's a par 3 and the next was a par 5, and water and sand and dog legs and everything. But making adjustments is what it's supposed to be about. And let's hope they don't ever go to running 36 races on tracks that are all the same, because
we're pretty close. Wait a minute.
We think it's boring now.
We're pretty close to that now with the mile and a halfers.
The mile and a halfers are. Yeah.
We're already there.
Yeah, those are the same.
We've lost Rockingham. We've lost another race at the second race, I guess, at Darlington with the funny egg shape. The North Wilkesboro tracks with character and history, and replace them with laser guided GPS setups that make them almost the same.
Yeah, generic tracks make for generic racing. It's that's simple.
With generic cars.
Yeah, and generic drivers if NASCAR keeps hammering away at them. But having said that, overall, it's still, I don't want to be too pessimistic about racing. I think NASCAR has done a lot of good things. You start with the safety innovations.
Yep.
You really got to applaud them for that. Sometimes I think they over-legislate. Well, a lot of times they over-legislate. But overall, the health, the sport's not too bad a shape because again we're complaining about the lack of attendance last week at a race that drew about 80,000 people. And again, that's a sellout for most NFL football teams, and hockey teams would give their grandmothers false teeth to get a crowd like that, and Major League Baseball and any other any other pro sport would kill for a crowd like we're complaining about the one that turned out at Bristol last week.
That's scary.
It's not that bad.
I say, and the other half is it's been a pretty good season already. Been pretty competitive. You've had a bunch of different winners.
Good storylines.
Good storylines. Where it goes from here, obviously, is left to be seen. We've gone a little bit further than we should have in segment number 2. We're going to come back with a short segment 3, but first I got to tell you about our friends at All and Cooper CPAs. Tax time is literally around the corner. Boys and girls, you're 3 weeks or less than 3 weeks away from having to settle up with your favorite uncle. Don't get caught, don't get in trouble. And the smart move is to go ahead and get these folks online to help you all year long. And then at the end of the year, when this happens, you're kind of like me, you just go, okay, and sign your name and figure out, is it good or bad or how bad? But that's All in Cooper CPAs. We'll come back and wrap up Pit Pass right after this.
Bandwidth for today's show is brought to you by SoftLayer.com. We love SoftLayer here at Talkapolis. They are the greatest hosting company ever. They make everything easy. Check out their website at SoftLayer.com. Thanks again for sponsoring the show.
And welcome back, everybody, to the final segment of Pit Pass. Joe Williams, Larry Woody. When we get done here, we're taping on Friday. It's a little unusual, and we just go over to the batter's box for a little lunch. You can do that, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. The batter's box at 43 Hermitage Avenue. Turns out a bunch of folks that I went to high school with seem to go out there quite a bit. So that's a good thing. Now they're going and watching the races a little bit more.
Good food, good atmosphere.
Yeah,
What more
always.
do you want?
Highland Rim Speedway, the best little short track here in Middle Tennessee if you want to go weekly racing. And Larry, let's face it, that's where the excitement remains, is in the weekly racing. Yeah. The guys and gals who go out there and do it because they love it and trying to build a future. Got a big schedule. We're getting close. We've been talking about this for a while. We keep getting closer and closer and closer to the start of the real racing season, which opens April the 13th at Highland Rim, their first event. Tomorrow, last week was their job fair. Tomorrow they're going to actually take some time off to relax a little bit. Well, that's a lie. You know Buddy and that bunch. Buddy, Roger, and them there. But nobody will be up there, let's say. Practice on the 30th, media day on the 6th, and the first race on April 13th. Larry, media days are always a lot of fun. You remember what they used to be like when the local media would actually come out and do some things.
Yeah, and you could go out and you could meet the drivers. It's relaxed. They're not under pressure. They're not scurrying around, trying to get their cars, tinkered on and ready to race. So it's a good, relaxed atmosphere. It's always fun. And as we said before, Joe, there's no more great human interest stories for the media than these little racetracks like Highland Rim. I mean, you could go there and wander around for a couple hours and fill up a notebook. You could get 20 good stories. There's almost everywhere you go down pit road, there's a story. And it's just, from the media standpoint, it's great.
The Rim, of course, I guess 50 plus years again, going to go at it. Unless you've actually been there to feel the atmosphere of this place, Larry, it truly is one of those racetracks that just, it exudes Saturday night. Have you ever saw Madhouse, which was an A&E program where they followed the folks at Bowman Gray, and what a great story Bowman Gray is. And they used the open wheel modifieds as their premier division, and that was, you just kind of got the feeling that this was the kind of place where, the old time guys would have come. Now, I don't think the Rim is quite as entrenched with folks who truly hate each other and wish nothing but ill will and concrete for the front end of their competitors, but still kind of that same historic feel.
And you have some good rivalries. Every season there'll be some couple of guys. Usually it's 2 or 3 guys running up front, and there's only room for one car in front. So, but that's good. That's what racing is supposed to be about. You're not supposed to pull over and wave people through. But good rivalries. You don't have any real friction or anything like that. So it's good. It's what that's how racing started out. That's how it grew to be the sport that it is from the Highland rims around the country.
Yeah.
That's what made NASCAR. And if it weren't for the people like the ones that are going to be racing on April 13th out at Highland Rim, we wouldn't be talking about the Cup guys and girls going to California this week, because there wouldn't be a NASCAR as we know it without the Highland rims of 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah. Now, if you ever thought about driving a car?
No, other than just the one over to your house, when you invite me to dinner, but certainly not on the racetrack.
Would you be interested?
No, I wouldn't. I remember what happened to our buddy Rudy Kalis one night. Reporters should stay in the press box, and the driver should stay on the racetrack. That's always been my philosophy. And I remember what happened to you too. Speaking of reporters who got behind the wheel of a race driver.
Yeah, but I'd do it again, I think.
I always made a deal with Darrell Walter. If I wouldn't drive his race car, and Darrell wouldn't tell me how to write my stories, and we had a pretty good working relationship for about 35 years. But no, to answer you, seriously, I've never driven one, Joe.
Would you be interested at all?
No, I wouldn't. I'm too old and brittle now.
The reason I'm asking,
you're trying to lure me out.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to hook you in, because the Rim is going to put together a front-wheel drive enduro. Now, if you've ever wanted to go racing, find out what it's about, this is the way to do it. Very inexpensive, and we'll have more details as they finish releasing all the rules and everything. Larry, basically what it is, they're requiring now a front-wheel drive car. I knew this day would come. But you make a few safety modifications. Everything else is literally stock, and you go out there and you race.
What's the difference in an enduro and a demolition derby?
An enduro you race, you don't crash on purpose.
You're not trying to wipe the competition.
No, you're trying to beat the competition.
Yep.
Besides, smaller is quicker and faster.
and whoever endures is the winner.
Yeah, but we'll have more details. A front-wheel drive enduro at the Rim. I remember they did, Harold Chaffin did one New Year's Day of 1985. Did one of the old enduros. Joe Carver Jr. actually drove the car, but we had a group of us from the fairgrounds that went up there. It snowed. It stinking snowed. On New Year's Day, it's flurries. I mean, it's not like it was anything big, but I can remember standing there shaking my head going, we gotta be crazy.
I remember I went to the Rim a few years ago that announced that they're going to have a demo derby. I went up and I was watching it, and I told the promoter at the time, I said, man, this is one of the greatest demolition derbies I've ever seen. And they said, no, this is the race. The demo derby starts after a while. So,
well, Larry,
pretty good action.
You're going to get us all in trouble now. Larry's been a good week. We'll come back next week, talk about California. Any parting thoughts on what you expect?
Yeah, but after we sit here and prophesied about what a boring race it'll be on this big 2-mile flat track, as I say, Joe, it may be one of the greatest stock car races in history. We may be replaying this race for months to come. I think it'll be interesting. I've just got a feeling that the drivers have heard people like you and me complaining about the lack of racing. At some point, they're going to get fed up with it, and they're going to start racing again. Maybe Sunday at California.
I think you're right. One final note for this week, and that is this, and this is for everybody out there. Just remember something important for me, okay? And that is this: being too slow on a racetrack is maybe as dangerous or more so than being too fast or faster than everybody else. And you know what? That transfers right over to the interstate too. So for the 2 cars from Michigan who were going 45 in the left-hand lane this morning, thank you for waking me up out of fear. I have been a long time since I've seen that many vehicles go shooting off in different directions. And by the way, the guy from Williamson County who made the move to the left between the wall and the cars and made it, buddy, I want to know who you are, because I think you've got a future in racing.
Is it true that you were actually black flagged off 540 this morning?
No, but, well, it wasn't black flagged. I think it was a little fear more than anything else. I'm missing some upholstery in the seat, but that's another story. Folks, join us next week. For Larry Woody, I'm Joe Williams. We'll see you then on Pit Pass.